unpack it. When we talk about, like when I talk to a pastor about you can disciple generosity, they just look at me like calf at a new gate. Like, really? And so the question here is, can you actually disciple generosity? And if so, how, without it feeling icky?
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to say here is, as I'm diagnosing in the book, and just when I'm hanging out with you and we're talking, is the men and women that lead churches, particularly in North America, are kind of my tribe, right? So whenever I'm even critiquing what's going on in the church, I come at it as a fellow sojourner. I pastored for a dozen years before I shifted into more of this coaching role. And so to some extent, I want to say about all of us, we haven't really been given the tools to shift the money talk from the finance department to the discipleship office. We were really never taught that. That's not something that at least we covered in seminary, and a lot of my mentors and leaders, most of the time when they were talking about money, it was about budgets or being behind budget or ahead of budget, or budgets driving what we're doing or whatever. And to some extent, that's a very real part of church life. But one of the kind of statements I make in the book and in my own coaching is, Jesus doesn't allow us just to leave money into the budget sort of how do we pay the bills category. As a matter of fact, every time he was talking about money, it had much more to do with, as you know, someone's heart or their attitude or their posture or their level of willingness to open up their hands. And yet still at the church, even though we kind of know that cognitively about Jesus' teaching or what scripture says, we still default to saying, hey, once a year, we're going to have a stewardship sermon series, or we're going to talk about money only when we absolutely have to because we're so far behind budget. And so we unintentionally train people that what they're giving is only about keeping the church afloat. And that's not true. And Jesus doesn't allow us to even have that as a sort of baseline of what giving is all about. So it's a much longer and deeper conversation. But what we try to say to senior leaders is, if this is a key part of being a Jesus follower, then it's like every other aspect of discipleship or maturation in the faith or sanctification, if you want to use the big word. Like, how do you get from one point to another in your prayer life? Well, you start in a very elementary way, and then your parents and pastors and mentors show you what's the next step, the next step, the next step. How do you grow in your understanding of how to wrestle with scripture? Well, you start at a very elementary level. Like I said, when I was little, the pages were thick and the pictures were cartoon-like. But then over time, someone showed me, here's how to interpret scripture. And we went from step to step to step. But in the church, we don't disciple. We just have this sort of on-off switch of giving where we say, you're either generous or you're not. You either have the light switch on or you don't. We don't take the time to disciple people, to take them by the hand and mentor them or walk them through. Well, what about this next step? What about testing God in this way? What about trying this as a way to open up your hands and release what God has given you? And so I'm really calling me and all of my friends to say, what if we did it differently and we really put it into the discipleship office?